Something's growing in the DC universe. Here's your look at the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Swamp Thing. While scientist Alec Holland was working on a formula to grow plant life where there was none, a rival organization vying for the formula set off a bomb that covered Alex in his biorestorative serum. To escape the flames of the explosion, he stumbled into a nearby swamp where he was mutated into the strange hero known as Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing has superhuman strength and the ability to regenerate any portion of his body. He can also command plants to do his bidding and change locations instantly by inhabiting vegetation anywhere in the world. Swamp Thing. Is he amazing? We'll find out shortly. First thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to put the ruler up to the very top of his head, and we're going to see how tall the figure stands. This one's a pretty big figure. You're looking at Swamp Thing standing 11.5 inches in height, or a little over 29 centimeters tall. And just to put that in proper perspective, we're going to bring in some of the other DC Multiverse figures that we've looked at before. One of my personal favorites, the Batman. We can also bring in the Superman. Now, again, these are just regular-sized DC Multiverse figures for something a little bit bigger in comparison. We can also bring in the Batman from Earth -1. And even in the case of a bigger, bulkier figure from that Doomsday Batman, he even still only goes to about the mid-forearm of Swamp Thing. So as you can see, Swamp Thing does tower over the other figures that McFarlane Toys have produced. For Swamp Thing's accessories, he comes included with a swappable spike hand. He comes included with a trading card. He also comes included with a display stand. Now, I know you're seeing 2 display stands right now. What's the deal with that? The deal with that is I just wanted to show you guys what the stand looked like on his own, and unfortunately I need another secondary stand just to prevent the figure from falling over. Yeah, more on that in a second. Starting though first, the figure comes included with a trading card. Now, once again, McFarlane's team has treated us to figure photography rather than actually using source material. At least to their credit, they put it in an environment where it would look like Swamp Thing would be walking around the waters. It does look nice, and they've darkened the colors. You can still see, by the joints, that's clearly the figure and not a real living creature of Swamp Thing walking around. Does such a thing exist? It probably does somewhere. On the back of the card, it has the real name of Alec Holland and then a paragraph read-up that you can either freeze and read for yourself, or you can also backtrack to the beginning of this video, because it so happens to be the same paragraph I read too. Let's put that to the side. Figure comes also included with a display stand. A display stand I can certainly add to the rest of my collection of display stands I'm not currently using. Or again, I just decided to bring another one in so I can show you what it looks like. But nothing's changed between this one and any of the other DC display stands we looked at before. I just decided to bring a second one in so I could at least use the one that came included with the figure to prevent him from falling over. The other accessory, as mentioned earlier, he comes included with like a spike weapon. It's interesting the way that they've sculpted this. It basically just like an impaling device that he can use to stab somebody with. The coloring is good. It kind of looks like something that you would find on your plate in a fancy restaurant and not really know what vegetable it is. Excuse me, waiter, what vegetable is this? Oh, he's speaking French. I don't even know what he's saying. It does certainly look interesting enough. Part of it kind of looks like an asparagus, a very spiky looking asparagus. But you can see at least they've rooted some vines and weeds all around. A little greenery is really nicely done on here. I mean, at least they did break up the colors so it's not all the same swamp green. They added some much appreciated darker green in there as well. A really nice job on the sculpting of this. Now, you can swap this out. It doesn't matter really which hand you want to go with. At the beginning of this review, I decided to go with this hand, and further into that, I'm probably just going to continue using this hand, but it doesn't really matter. Go ahead and take Swamp Thing off his display stand. I'm going to have to keep that pretty close nearby. You'll see why in a second. Go ahead just to remove the hand. First of all, I want to show you what the hand looks like before we swap things out. I kind of like the way that the fingers look like they're decaying a little bit. And it still has that familiar green sort of wrapping around each of the individual digits. Really nice paint work done on McFarlane's part. But we're going to go ahead for right now, at least. We're going to go ahead and remove the hand. You sort of have to really hold on to it for dear life and yank it out of the socket and then replace it with pointy asparagus. Sorry, what is this called again? Oh yeah, he's still speaking French. Go ahead and pop that back in place. And now Swamp Thing at least has a stabby weapon. I would have also liked if they could have included, I mean, considering that this is a mega scale figure, I would imagine that they could have also included some other weapon with this as well. The spike is fine and it serves the purpose perfectly, but yeah, why not just have like an extending, I don't know, like a whip vine or something else, other than that he can actually carry around with him. But it looks good. I mean, it somewhat does the job of seamlessly blending in with the rest of his forearm. It kind of looks more like an asparagus when you look at it. Why am I so set on asparagus right now? But you can do that, or again, you can swap it back to the defaulted hand. I think I might just end up displaying the figure personally if I can provide and get him to stand. I think I'm just going to display him with two hands instead of the spike. I appreciate the fact it's there, but I don't think it really adds anything to it. And I kind of like the more gestured hands myself. Going to start things off, certainly with looking at Swamp Thing's face. The whole phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, which is somewhat ironic that I'm going to be saying that talking about the Swamp Thing figure. More on that in a second. But certainly when it comes to the head sculpt of Swamp Thing, it's nice to see that, first of all, in the DC Rebirth, they didn't do too much changing when it comes to Swamp Thing's face. He still sort of has that over lip of a nose that sort of hides the lower mouth just below that. I think they've done that nicely here in the figure. Whereas certainly there has been criticism in the past that McFarlane doesn't paint enough of their figures. I really think they have done it quite a bit here more with Swamp Thing. Not only do you have the darker colors for his eyes, but they've also brushed nicely a little bit of darker black just around the areas of that nose, or what would have been his nose, just to see what it looks like from a side profile. I also like as well the way that they painted the paint, where it actually has sort of a wet look to it, like it would have just came out of the water. The red eyes certainly do help to make that look a lot more like Swamp Thing, and just the sculpting alone on just the head, you can kind of see these little Brussels sprouts growing out from the tops of his head. I can't imagine those really Brussels sprouts. Really nice sculpt work on their part. Now, sculpting does continue on nicely for the rest of his body. Again, you sort of have little broccoli florets there, as well as little vines that grow out from the front of his chest. And it's blended in so nicely with the darker coloring that they've used. I like that they've sort of kept the colors to this color right here, kind of a really kind of off grayish swamp green. And then the brighter colors are the things that they put over top of it, rather than reversing it. I think this character would have looked too washed out, or too heavily saturated in color more so, if they had gone with more of a darker green for like the majority of his body. Swamp Thing really should be a paler color of green, and I really like the colors that they decided to go with here. Interesting thing about Swamp Thing's hands is that he does have these little vines that stick out, that are made of softer plastic. He does also have these leaves that sort of serve as shoulder pads, and if you peel them away carefully, you can kind of see what would look like almost tree bark sculpted underneath. These do kind of get in the way when it comes to the articulation on the figure, but believe you me, it's the least of my problems when it comes to the articulation on the figure. Spinning him around so you can see it from all the sides. This leaf is a little bit bigger of the two, and this actually is the one that's a little bit harder when it comes to moving his arm. It's still attached further down. It's attached right here, but it's not attached really by much. That if you are not careful, and especially when it comes to moving his arms out, they could easily get snagged. I've already had this happen a couple of times where these leaves get sort of caught underneath here. We'll talk more about that in a second. But I think the leaves look good. Did it really need any extra color? I don't think so. I mean, sticking with greens, I think, is the best route to go when it comes to a character like Swamp Thing. Yeah, they could have thrown in a few little flowers here and there, but I think really sticking to green is the best way they could have gone. You can also see as well that his body is sort of irregular. It's not quite symmetrical up the middle. That you can see a little more of the vines on this side, a little less on this side, a little more of the broccoli florets on this side, and not necessarily on this side. So I like that it's not consistently symmetrical all the way down the figure. Now, when we get to the legs, this is certainly something I really want to spend some time talking about. Again, the sculpting is good. I have no fault for the sculpting. If anything, I would say that the feet could have afforded, I think, to be just a little bit longer. For starters, I think they're way too small for the size of his body. Oh, again, that nice sculpting on his leg. But I think they are too small for his body from a design standpoint. But I also think they're way too small for keeping the figure upright. Again, we'll talk more about the articulation in a second. Some nice sculpting there on the feet, as well as some nice shrubbery up the side of his legs as well. Everywhere you look on this figure, there's something that you may have not noticed before. All these little leaves and stuff growing out the back of his torso. Okay. Let's talk about the figure's articulation now. This is, again, a big issue for me. I'm going to start first with his head. No, that's not the issue. The head rotates back and forth on a ball joint. It's a little tight on quarters. You can't really move the head up just by how close he is to the very broad neck that they've sculpted. You can rotate it fine back and forth this way, and he does also slightly rock, but very, very little. When it comes to his arms, the arms do come out. Now, again, be careful of these leaves. This one, I think, is the more worrisome of the two. This one does a fine enough job of sort of tucking in there. But this one, again, only being attached right here. If you're not too careful moving this back and forth, I've already had it a couple of times where the leaf got stuck in there, and I started rotating it. I couldn't figure out why the arm wasn't moving until I realized I wasn't using my peepers, that the leaf actually got stuck inside, and I almost even ran the risk of breaking that right off. So just be careful. The arms rotate back and forth. I guess, first of all, the arms rotate all the way around. They do hinge out at a comfortable 90-degree angle bend, despite for how much sculpting they've put onto the figure here. The figure has a bicep swivel. The figure only has, sadly, a single hinge in his elbow, but it's fine. I mean, to sacrifice one joint in his elbow for really a figure you're not going to be putting in some real crazy poses anyways, at least the sculpting doesn't get sacrificed. So I'm fine for the fact that they actually use just a single joint instead. The hands, whatever hands you decide to go with, I'm going to stick with these for right now. They rotate all the way around, a little vine, right there. And again, even though it's the spike hand, you can still bend it back and forth. You can do the exact same thing on this hand as well. The upper torso is on a ball joint, and then as well, the lower torso is also on a ball joint. There's so many good layers of stuff going on here. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Getting to his legs, you may notice right away that I've got a gap right here, and I don't have a gap here. I would only suspect that it's the figure that I happen to have. Lucky, lucky me. I can't imagine this is an issue across the board. So if you did have this figure already in your collection, let me know if you have a similar issue with a thigh. It may not necessarily be this thigh, but this is the thigh I'm having the big issue with. When it comes to his leg, this leg is fine. I'm going to hinge it out. Well, first of all, you can bring the leg forward. No issues there. You can bring it also back. No issues there. But when you bring the leg outward, normally this is what one would expect to find on the inside of a DC Multiverse figure. Remember, there's like that little pin joint that attaches to the kind of little ratcheted ledges here that allow the leg to move back and forth. And then it's pegged essentially into this area of his crotch. So it rotates, yeah, right, back and forth. And then it also gives you that ratcheted joint in and out. That's not the issue. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to hinge this leg out. I'm going to hinge this leg out. And you may already notice, even if you're fans of the original 80s Sesame Street, one of these things is not like the other. Can you see the difference between the two leg joints? This is what it should normally look like. I don't know what's happened actually over here. It's a completely different joint. It's got to be assembled wrong, but I was even looking at that and thinking, it's not even feeling like it's assembled wrong. I almost feel like the wrong part was even used. Because, like, it doesn't look like it even attaches to anything. It looks like it's just literally clamped on, almost as if they probably used the shoulder joint down here in the leg by mistake. Because, again, this is what it should look like. This is sort of the thrown together Frankenstein joint that I have on his other leg. Again, if you have this figure, let me know down below in the comments section if you've had this same issue. What ends up resulting in this, just this thrown together makeshift leg, it's way too loose. Nothing feels like it's holding together. And it even feels, while looking at it, it looks like it's barely holding on. Like this is just only clamping onto this joint, but it could literally break or come off at any time. Be careful. I mean, I'm going to be careful. I don't hope that your figures are going to have the same issue. Anyways, on this leg, the more stable of the two legs, he does have a double hinge on the knee. And the figure does also have an ankle pivot back and forth this way as well, and also toe articulation. I really was disappointed because getting this figure out of the packaging, he looks great, but you can already see he has no ability to stand straight. There's no weight really you can put on this one leg that I unfortunately do have to use myself a display stand. I do think like Swamp Thing maybe is a little too big as well. I hate to be that guy, that single person that says this figure is way too big. Why did he have to be so big? But I do feel like maybe Swamp Thing could have been a little bit smaller. I really should have brought in like Lobo for comparison of sizes, but I think like Lobo set, I think what would be a good size-wise for these bigger mega-sized DC figures. Swamp Thing, when you compare him, say, even again to the likes of Batman. Let's bring in Batman once again, because that was like a reasoning to bring in Batman. I think he's way too big. I think Swamp Thing probably could have gone to maybe about the section of his bicep. Maybe given that much more clearance over top of a regular DC Multiverse figure. I don't think Swamp Thing needed to be this big. That causes one big problem, especially for a figure that's misassembled the way that mine is. Not only is he way too big, but more of the weight is now focused on this one leg that just unfortunately can't carry the weight of Swamp Thing. And that again is a real shame. So the epilogue here for the DC Multiverse Swamp Thing from McFarlane Toys is I'm probably going to reach out to the company where I bought this figure online, show them the images of how the leg was constructed on the one side, and ask if there was any way that I could get a replacement. If it means I have to still buy myself a second Swamp Thing, I might just end up having to do it. I like the look of Swamp Thing. Still, I think the figure's way too tall to be fitting in well with the rest of your DC Multiverse figures, but still, size isn't so much the issue, at least on my figure. The biggest issue is the way that the one leg was constructed. And again, I just want to say, I'm sure it's only isolated to the one figure that I got. Out of all the ones I'm sure this online site had in their stock room, they just happened to pull the one that has misassembled legs. Again, I don't even know what joint was used for the tops of the thigh. It looks either like an ankle joint or a shoulder joint. Somebody, I think, at the factory put the wrong joint in when it came to leg, because as you even saw in this video, those two joints don't look anything alike. Other than that, though, it's a nice looking figure. I've been a big fan of Swamp Thing anyways, loving the original 90s cartoon, and then kind of getting into the stuff that we were getting also from Mattel, Mattel, the DC Multiverse Swamp Thing was a great figure as well. It was sort of all encased in rubber. This Swamp Thing I would put pretty high up on that list for successful Swamp Things, other than, unfortunately, the one joint on the top of his leg, which I just can't overlook. What do you guys think of this figure? Let me know down below in the comments section. And if you did have the chance to pick this one up for yourself, let me know if you've had also any similar issues with the top of Swamp Thing's leg. It may not even be that one leg. It may be the other leg, or just if you've had any issues with the way that this figure was assembled. Let me know, please, down below in the comments section. And if you are new to this channel, you're enjoying the content you're seeing, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Turn on the bell notification so you get those friendly reminders whenever new videos are going to be popping up. And if you have the chance, at the very end of this video, popping up shortly, will be a playlist of all the DC Multiverse figures that I've looked at from McFarlane Toys. Feel free to give that a gander if you have a little bit of available time. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.